When Jennifer and Mike Collins decided to take their 4-year-old son, Tommy, to an Elvis concert, they were very worried. Tommy had Down syndrome and would get restless in large crowds. Most people would look at him with strange eyes. His family wanted to introduce him to music, but they were afraid of other people's reactions. The behavior Elvis would show Tommy that night would change not only the little boy forever, but also the 17,000 people there. The Collins family of Nashville, Tennessee, had always believed that their son, Tommy, deserved to experience all the joys that life had to offer, regardless of the challenges he faced. Tommy was a bright, affectionate 4-year-old with Down syndrome, and while his developmental differences sometimes made daily life more complex, his parents, Jennifer and Mike, were determined to give him as normal and enriching a childhood as possible. Tommy had been born with the extra chromosome that characterizes Down syndrome, bringing with it certain physical features and intellectual delays that made him different from other children his age. He had the distinctive almond-shaped eyes, a flatter facial profile, and the smaller stature typical of children with his condition. More significantly, his intellectual development was slower than that of his peers, and he had difficulty with speech and complex social interactions. Despite these challenges, Tommy was a remarkably happy child with an infectious smile and an innate love for music. From the earliest age, he would clap his hands and bounce with delight whenever he heard rhythmic sounds. His parents had noticed that music seemed to reach him in ways that other forms of communication sometimes could not. When Tommy was upset or overwhelmed, a gentle melody could calm him. When he was happy, music could amplify his joy in the most beautiful way. Jennifer, a former elementary school teacher, had left her career to care for Tommy full-time, dedicating herself to his development and well-being. She worked tirelessly with therapists, attended support groups for parents of children with disabilities, and researched every possible way to help her son reach his full potential. Mike, an accountant at a local firm, had initially struggled to accept his son's diagnosis, but had grown into a fiercely protective and loving father who would do anything to see Tommy happy. The decision to attend an Elvis concert had not been made lightly. Jennifer and Mike had been discussing it for weeks, weighing the potential benefits against the possible risks and challenges. They both knew that Tommy loved music, and they had heard that Elvis Presley had a reputation for being kind and inclusive with his fans. However, they also knew that large crowds could be overwhelming for Tommy, and they worried about how other concert-goers might react to their son's behavior and appearance. The 1970s were a time when public understanding and acceptance of developmental disabilities were far less advanced than they would become in later decades. Children with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities were often institutionalized or hidden away from public view. When they did appear in public spaces, they frequently encountered stares, whispers, and sometimes outright hostility from people who didn't understand their conditions. Jennifer and Mike had experienced this prejudice firsthand on numerous occasions. They had been asked to leave restaurants when Tommy became excited and vocal. They had endured stares and inappropriate comments from strangers in grocery stores and parks. Some people would look at Tommy with pity, others with disgust, and still others would simply look away as if pretending he didn't exist. These experiences had made the couple increasingly protective of their son, but they also recognized that isolation wasn't the answer. They wanted Tommy to experience the world and all it had to offer, even if that meant facing occasional ignorance and prejudice from others. The Elvis concert represented a significant step outside their comfort zone. The venue would be packed with thousands of people, the music would be loud, and the environment would be unpredictable. Tommy's reactions to such stimulation could be equally unpredictable. He might become overwhelmed and need to leave, or he might become so excited that his behavior would draw unwanted attention. After much deliberation, Jennifer and Mike decided that the potential for joy outweighed the risks. They had seen how music affected their son, and they believed that experiencing live music performed by one of the world's greatest entertainers could be profoundly meaningful for him. They also hoped that surrounding Tommy with the positive energy of music and celebration might help counteract some of the negative experiences they had encountered elsewhere. On the evening of the concert, October 12, 1975, the family prepared carefully for their outing. Jennifer packed a small bag with Tommy's favorite snacks, a comfort toy, and noise-reducing headphones in case the volume became too overwhelming for him. She dressed him in his best clothes, a small suit that made him look particularly handsome and dignified. Mike had purchased seats in a section that would allow them to leave quickly if necessary, but that still provided a good view of the stage. He had also contacted the venue ahead of time to explain their situation and ensure that they would have access to any accommodations they might need. As they drove to the International Hotel in Las Vegas, where Elvis was performing his regular residency shows, Tommy sat in his car seat, clapping his hands and babbling with excitement. He couldn't fully understand where they were going, but he could sense his parents' anticipation and was responding to their positive energy. "Music, Mama, music!" Tommy said in his distinctive speech pattern, one of the few clear phrases he had mastered. "Yes, sweetheart," Jennifer replied, turning to smile at her son. "We're going to hear beautiful music tonight." When they arrived at the venue, the scene was exactly what Jennifer and Mike had expected and feared. Thousands of elegantly dressed Elvis fans were streaming into the hotel, chatting excitedly about the upcoming performance. The energy was electric, but it was also overwhelming. Almost immediately, the family began to attract attention. Tommy's distinctive features and his excited, somewhat unusual behavior made him stand out in the crowd. Some people stared openly. Others whispered to their companions while glancing in their direction. A few individuals smiled warmly at Tommy, but many others seemed uncomfortable or even disapproving. "Are you sure he should be here?" they overheard one woman say to her husband. "He might disrupt the show." Jennifer felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain calm for Tommy's sake. Mike placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder and guided his family through the crowd as quickly as possible. Inside the venue, they found their seats and tried to settle in. Tommy was fascinated by the grandeur of the showroom, the sparkling chandeliers, the elegant table settings, the stage with its elaborate lighting setup. He pointed at everything, making excited sounds and clapping his hands in delight. Unfortunately, his enthusiasm was drawing more attention from nearby audience members. Jennifer noticed several people at adjacent tables exchanging looks and comments that were clearly about Tommy. She began to feel increasingly anxious, wondering if they had made a mistake in coming. "Maybe we should leave," she whispered to Mike. "I don't think this is working." "Let's give it a few more minutes," Mike replied, though he too was growing concerned about the reactions they were receiving. "Once the show starts, maybe people will focus on Elvis instead of us." When the lights dimmed and Elvis took the stage, the reaction from the crowd was explosive. 17,000 people rose to their feet, applauding and cheering with incredible enthusiasm. The energy in the room was palpable, and for a moment, the Collins family felt like they were part of something larger and more beautiful than their daily struggles with prejudice and misunderstanding. Elvis appeared in one of his magnificent white jumpsuits, adorned with intricate beadwork and rhinestones that caught the stage lights brilliantly. His presence was commanding and charismatic, immediately capturing the attention of every person in the venue. When he began to sing "Love Me Tender," his rich, powerful voice filled every corner of the enormous room. Tommy's reaction to Elvis was immediate and profound. The little boy's face lit up with pure joy, and he began clapping his hands in rhythm with the music. He swayed in his seat, making happy sounds that were his way of singing along. For the first time since they had arrived, Tommy seemed completely comfortable and at peace. However, his enthusiastic response was still drawing attention from other audience members. Some people were charmed by his obvious enjoyment of the music, but others seemed annoyed by his vocalizations and movements. Jennifer noticed several people at nearby tables shushing them or making disapproving gestures. Elvis, who had been performing for audiences of all kinds for nearly 2 decades, had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense the energy and emotions of his crowds. He could feel when someone was particularly moved by his music, when someone was having a difficult time, or when someone needed special attention. As he performed Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis's eyes swept across the audience, making personal connections with as many fans as possible. It was during this visual survey of the crowd that he noticed something that caught his attention immediately.
In one section of the venue, Elvis spotted a small boy who was clearly different from the other children in the audience. The child appeared to have Down syndrome, and his enthusiastic but somewhat unusual responses to the music were attracting both positive and negative attention from those around him. Elvis could see that the little boy was absolutely delighted by the performance, but he could also sense the tension and discomfort that some audience members were displaying toward the child and his family. Elvis had always had a special place in his heart for people who faced challenges or discrimination. Throughout his career, he had quietly supported various charities and causes, often focusing on children and individuals with disabilities. He believed deeply that music belonged to everyone, regardless of their circumstances or abilities. What Elvis witnessed in that moment troubled him. He could see the pure joy that the little boy was experiencing, but he could also see the judgmental looks and whispered comments from some audience members. The contrast between the child's innocent happiness and the prejudice surrounding him was stark and heartbreaking. Without breaking his performance, Elvis began to focus more of his attention on that particular section of the audience. He made eye contact with the little boy several times, smiling warmly and giving him small waves during instrumental breaks. Tommy responded with increased excitement, clapping harder and bouncing in his seat. Then, during a pause between songs, Elvis made a decision that would surprise everyone in the venue and create a moment that none of them would ever forget. Instead of moving directly into his next planned song, Elvis walked to the front of the stage and addressed the audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the venue's sound system, "I want to talk to you about something that's very important to me." The crowd quieted, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Music is a gift that belongs to all of us," Elvis continued. "It doesn't matter what we look like, how we talk, or how we move. Music speaks to the heart, and every heart deserves to feel that joy." He paused and looked directly toward the section where Tommy and his family were seated. "I see a little boy out there who is feeling the music in a very special way. Son, would you like to come up here and help me with a song?" The audience turned to look toward Tommy, and Jennifer felt her heart begin to race. She wasn't sure how to respond. Tommy had never been on a stage before, and she worried about how he might react to such overwhelming attention. But Tommy himself had no such hesitations. When he realized that Elvis was talking to him, his face broke into the biggest smile Jennifer had ever seen. He began clapping enthusiastically and trying to stand up in his chair. "I think that's a yes," Elvis said with a laugh, charming the entire audience with his warmth and inclusivity. Venue staff quickly appeared to help escort Tommy and his parents toward the stage. As they made their way through the crowd, something beautiful began to happen. Instead of the stares and whispers they had been receiving earlier, the family was met with smiles, applause, and words of encouragement. "How wonderful!" one woman called out as they passed. "What a special little boy!" said another. When they reached the stage, Elvis knelt down to Tommy's level and extended his hand. "Hello there, partner," he said gently. "What's your name?" "Tommy," the little boy said clearly, his excitement making his speech more articulate than usual. "Well, Tommy, it's very nice to meet you," Elvis replied. "Would you like to help me sing a song for all these nice people?" Tommy nodded enthusiastically, and Elvis carefully helped him up onto the stage. The crowd watched in complete silence, captivated by this unexpected and touching interaction. "This song is for Tommy," Elvis announced, "and for everyone who knows that music comes from the heart, not from being perfect." Elvis began to sing "You Are My Sunshine," choosing a song that was simple enough for Tommy to participate in if he wanted to.
As the familiar melody filled the venue, Tommy began to sway and clap, his face glowing with happiness. But what happened next was even more remarkable. Instead of being disruptive or inappropriate, Tommy's presence on stage brought out something beautiful in the entire audience. People began to sing along more enthusiastically than they had all evening, their voices joining in a chorus of acceptance and joy. Elvis, recognizing the magic of the moment, knelt down beside Tommy and began to sing directly to him. The little boy, feeling safe and celebrated, began to sing along in his own unique way, not with perfect pitch or clear diction, but with pure, unfiltered joy. The audience was completely captivated. Many people had tears in their eyes as they witnessed this demonstration of inclusion and acceptance. The earlier discomfort and prejudice had been replaced by something much more beautiful: recognition of shared humanity and the universal power of music to bring people together. When the song ended, the venue erupted in the most heartfelt applause of the entire evening. People weren't just clapping for Elvis's performance, they were celebrating Tommy's courage, his joy, and the lesson they had all learned about acceptance and inclusion. Elvis helped Tommy down from the stage and spoke to the audience one more time. "I want everyone here to remember what Tommy just showed us," he said. "He reminded us that music isn't about being perfect. It's about being real, being joyful, and sharing that joy with others. Tommy, you made this whole night more beautiful just by being yourself." As the Collins family returned to their seats, they were met with a completely different reception than they had received earlier. People reached out to shake Tommy's hand, to congratulate his parents, and to express how moved they had been by the experience. "Your son is wonderful," one elderly woman told Jennifer, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for bringing him tonight. He taught us all something important." The rest of Elvis's performance was exceptional, but everyone agreed that the most memorable moment had been his interaction with Tommy. The little boy continued to enjoy the music throughout the evening, but now his enthusiasm was met with smiles and encouragement rather than stares and disapproval. After the concert, Elvis made sure to spend a few private minutes with the Collins family. He gave Tommy a special gift, a small silver music note pin that he had worn during the performance. "This is so you'll always remember," Elvis told Tommy, "that you have a beautiful voice and that music loves you just the way you are." The impact of that evening on both Tommy and his parents was profound and lasting. For Tommy, the experience gave him a sense of confidence and acceptance that stayed with him throughout his life. He continued to love music, and whenever he felt insecure or different, he would remember the night when Elvis Presley celebrated him in front of 17,000 people. For Jennifer and Mike, the evening was a turning point in how they approached the world with their son. They realized that while prejudice and ignorance still existed, there were also many people capable of acceptance, kindness, and inclusion when given the opportunity to see beyond surface differences. The story of Tommy and Elvis spread far beyond that concert venue, becoming a powerful example of how celebrities can use their platforms to promote acceptance and inclusion. It reminded everyone who heard it that every person, regardless of their abilities or differences, deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and kindness. Years later, Tommy would grow up to become an advocate for people with disabilities, always sharing the story of the night when Elvis Presley showed 17,000 people that differences are not defects, but simply different ways of experiencing and expressing the beauty of life. The evening proved that sometimes the most important moments in entertainment aren't about technical perfection or polished performances, but about genuine human connection and the courage to stand up for inclusion and acceptance when it matters most.